This is Impact with Don Wenner.
All right, welcome everybody. I'm here with Dr. David Phelps. It is a pleasure to have you today.
Oh, Don, it's always a pleasure. I love the conversations that we are able to have from time to time.
It is a blessing. I got to join you on your podcast here just recently and get to now return the favor, let you return the favor, I guess, of coming in and getting to talk to our listeners here and doing me a favor here, because I know you're going to have some incredible insights. And before we kind of fully dig in, I'd love you to be able to just tell us a little bit about Freedom Founders, incredible organization you run. I'd love for everybody to understand what Freedom Founders is all about.
Yeah, Don, Freedom Founders today it's a community organization. People call it their tribe. And I started out very, very focused with where I came from in my life, which was in the profession of dentistry, where I was trained, my technical skills. But a lot of people don't know that before I became a dentist, way back in the dark ages, before internet, before cell phones, I was actually investing in real estate as a very hands-on buy and hold investor. So I had that going from early on. I left dentistry some 15 plus years ago, and really for various reasons, which we can go into later. And I was trying to figure out what my next was going to be, because there's got to be a next. There's never such thing in my world as retirement. And so very organically, I had friends and colleagues of mine from dentistry and medicine who reached out to me and said, "Hey, David, how are you able to, kind of financially, let your practice go? It doesn't seem right to do that in your 40s. Why would you do it, and how did you do it?" And that kind of became the origin for Freedom Founders, because I realized that through my experience, which to me is just my experience, it wasn't anything novel to me. We all have our own stories, right, Don? And we think as we go up that, well, it's just kind of like normal, the ups and downs, the twists and turns. I'm just a regular guy just trying to grind it out there in the world and provide for my family. And I realized that I did have some insights that were unique to me that actually could help people that I understood, which were people in my profession who had done all this training in school and were out there, trading time for dollars at a relatively high level. But there was still more. There was an uncertainty about, how much is enough. So to cut the short story down, Freedom Founders organically started a little over a decade ago, when I was just starting to help a few colleagues see what I did in real estate. Very, very, very basic stuff, right? But they wanted to see, how does this alternative investing work? They've heard about it. They think, academically that real estate makes sense, but how do I enter into that arena and figure it out? So over time, we've grown to a very, I'd say, a very solid community, and we integrate a lot of other partners, trusted advisors like DLP, because why try to reinvent the wheel with everything? It's like collaborate with other people. So now we have this great collaboration with people that we are able to help more colleagues in my arena create financial freedom, which leads to what I call free for life, which leads to what we're talking about today, which is a lot to do with impact. What's next after you've achieved a certain level of, let's call it some security, some peace of mind, but you still realize there's more than just that.
Awesome. That was a great summary, and it certainly is a phenomenal organization. As David said, I've been a trusted advisor for quite some time. We share a number of phenomenal clients, investors, members of our tribes. I haven't met one yet, David, that haven't been just an incredible human being as well. So it's been a blessing. So there's a lot of great people out there who, as you just said, want to make an impact and work really hard and build some wealth and want to make an impact. And one of the crises that we're focused on here, though, is this, like we call the legacy crisis. And another kind of underlying kind of symptom of this is what people call the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And I love your perspective. Why does so many families of hardworking wealth creators fall victim to this crisis?
Yeah, it's a very common phenomenon, as you stated today, Don. So what happens in shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations is one generation is typically the matriarch and patriarch who build some kind of a family business or enterprise. Usually it's from the ground up, right? I mean, we're talking about starting with seed money or no money and starting a small business or dry cleaners or a restaurant or something. And just through hard work and effort and discipline and good habits, they build a relative amount of wealth beyond what they need to live a good life. And so I think the problem happens, Don, and I can be just as guilty, I could say, in my own life, is that we always want to, for our children and say grandchildren, the heirs to us, we want them to have, typically a better life than we do. We want them to have more, right? And so what do we think about doing? Well, we think about just giving them, making their life easier. How can I make their life easier by just providing for them so they don't have to go through any tough times, right? That's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. Is the building the wealth from the first generation took a lot of work and discipline and figuring things out and being resourceful. And if we don't allow our kids to go through somewhat the similar pathway of having to figure stuff out, how instead of just giving them stuff, they have to, if they want something, go out and earn it, figure it out. When I was a kid, Don, and I know your story just like mine, my parents fortunately didn't give me stuff. If I wanted a better bicycle than just the old clunker, that was a hand-me-down. If I wanted a better tennis racket. I was playing tennis, and I wanted a better racket. I wanted better shoes. I wanted Stan Smith Adidas shoes. My parents wouldn't provide for that. No, David, if you want that stuff, you go out and figure out how to earn it. So I learned to be resourceful at a young age, and took on lots of little odd jobs, selling greeting cards, in the neighborhood, mowing lawns, throwing newspaper. I mean, that's how I made my money to get the stuff that I wanted at my early age, my youthfulness. And I think today there's a lot of us, we tend to just give our kids that because we think, well, they deserve it. They should have it. And by the way, I'm so busy over here. Part of my guilt is offset by just giving them stuff. So what happens in shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations is that first generation builds it up through the hard work and effort. And then they pass on the money, the wealth to the next generation who never had any of the training that the first generation had. And so what happens when you don't have training to be resourceful about the blessings that you are given? Well, it falls apart. And I've seen this story firsthand, as I know you have, just through some of our other partners, is they'll find these generational wealth that gets diluted by poor management of the wealth that they accrued. And so by the 3rd generation, as the story goes, the wealth is dissipated, it's gone, it's zeroed out. And who benefited? I mean, nobody. No lessons were learned. The wealth was not used in a good way to have greater impact, which is really what I think we should be doing with wealth, is training, making other people that we allow to have some of the benefit of that, but have them be good stewards, have them prove their worthiness. There's lots of ways to do that. We could spend a lot of time on that, but I just think that's a model that people need to bear in mind is that, just as you said, the legacy. What is legacy really? And people think it's, giving stuff to the next generation, giving them stuff, passing on. I think you can do that, but you've got to pass it on with some strings attached, meaning it's got to be earned. The respect for that wealth has got to be earned before it's just passed on.
Love it. So you answered a few of my questions there already. So as I said, we could spend the whole rest of our conversation talking just about this, but can you give just maybe 1 or 2 ideas to, people say, yeah, I don't want this to happen to my family. We're all in different places of life, or age of our kids or grandkids, and we're on that journey. But what would be your recommendation? How do you go about training or educating your children or grandchildren to avoid this crisis?
Yeah, great question. And I could defer to our good mutual friend Jim Shields, who is all over this. Family board of directors of family governance. So I think those who have the wisdom, and I wish I would have had some of this wisdom years earlier, because again, I did not have this down by any means. I just see it through the lens of getting older and hopefully wiser, and seeing the mistakes that I've made and other people make as well. But I think, you've got to start with intentionality. Getting help, I think, from other people was what we all do, right, Don? And we're both big fans of mentors, people who have gone down a path that we look at and say there's values there. They're doing things well. Well, what can we learn from those people? What have they done with their family? So start there, but it starts with some kind of family governance where early on you are having some type of regular meetings with your family. And that can start at a young age, just again teaching responsibility about responsibility to oneself, to other people, responsibility for valuing things and money and resourcefulness. Start at a young age teaching those basic principles. Again, I would not be the one to go into great detail on that, but there are plenty of resources that could help somebody. I would just probably type in Google, family governance, and you'll probably just get a whole list of things that you could start implementing wherever you are with your family. It's never too late to start it, but the sooner you start, the better.
Awesome. Thank you. So I know you mentioned a little bit earlier on when you described Freedom Founders, the fact that, a lot of your clients are dentists, and they're used to earning, trading hours for dollars, and you help them get out of the chair per se and replace that income via real estate, forms of investments, mainly centered around real estate. So I know that's not the only driver though for Life Family. So yes, having that flexibility to not have to trade hours for dollars is a driver probably that brings a lot of them to you. But for the people I've met through your organization, a lot of them are focused on, as you said, making an impact. I like to say going from success to significance, which is a terminology I learned through the Halftime organization. So can you just touch a little bit about that journey, and what do you find for those successful people you work with who built a level of wealth and now they want to make a bigger impact? What drives them to that decision? What recommendations do you give to those who want to make a bigger impact in their life and with their wealth?
Don, I use some frameworks in Freedom Founders, and one of the frameworks is it's a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid is financial or economic freedom, where you actually have replaced through your acquisition or creation of assets that can produce a sustainable, predictable revenue, like real estate, which is the asset that we really love. So that seems like that's always a goal for everybody, right? I want to be financially independent, and it's almost like that's the top of the mountain, and people see it from afar when they're young, and as they go through midlife, it's still there, still the goal, and they're still trekking for it, and they even get into their 60s, and it's like, yeah, I'm still not there. Well, what's that peak really look like? Can you define it? Well, no, I really can't. I mean, have you ever really? No, I don't know what that is. So first thing is just giving clarity on what it means to be, quote, financially independent. So we call it a freedom number. And I won't go into details of how we help calculate that, but that's giving clarity. Now, what people find is, Don, and you know this very well, is that mountain peak that people were trying to send to, that the economic freedom, once they get there, it's not the final peak. They get there and now they look, oh, wait, there's another one. Well, what's that one look like? Well, that's what we're getting down to today. That's legacy and impact. Because once you've achieved what people try to get to their whole life is security, financial security, it's like, well, what was this really all about? I mean, was that really the whole driver? It's like, no, it's really, who are the people that you served along the way? How did you help other people? I mean, at the end of life, I mean, that's what we're going to look back on, Don. And we know that it's not how many deals did you do, how many millions did you make, and blah blah blah. That's part of keeping score in a business. I get that, but the real impact is looking back. It's like, did I leave the world in a better place? Where did I serve and have help? So when people finally have some certainty that they're on a track, not necessarily that they've reached economic independence, but they can see that it's happening, mile markers along the way, that takes pressure off. And when you can take some pressure off of that first mountain peak trek, then you can actually, take a breath and say, I can actually start living my life now. I don't have to wait till that mystical someday when I can, quote, retire because someone told me I have enough money in the bank or stock market. That's just typically not going to happen. So when you actually can see that you're getting there, whether you're there or not, that's when you can start living your life today, which is the most important thing. You cannot wait and procrastinate and put off all these things that you think you want to do, because some people don't never get to that date. It just, things happen in life, unfortunately. And so if you wait for that someday, it may not exist. So that's a big piece of what I see our members come in starting out typically very much is like, well, I want to be good stewards of my money and I don't know I have enough. So we help them through the frameworks and working with great people like DLP to get that money invested. And then they start to see the run rate. And then it starts to take the pressure off. And now they say, wow, I can actually look around now a little bit and there is more. And so helping them on that next front, I call it the next frontier. What's the next frontier do you want to be on? That means you don't have to quit your current business. It means you might just want to stay in your current business on your own terms. See, changing that dynamic has changed the whole aspirations of a number of our members who thought the first thing I want to do is get my money invested, sell the business, and get out because I'm so stressed out. Now you take the pressure off and it changes dynamics. It's like, actually, I can start doing the kind of treatment or procedures or services with the kind of people I really like to serve instead of having to take all comers, and maybe I don't have to deal with government regulations because I'm not taking the insurance. And it's a whole platform of situations that they can take off their plate. And now guess what? Life changes, it becomes so much better. So you don't have to quit what you're doing. You can just change the dynamics of it.
I love that. So as people come in and you help give them that clarity, and they've now, they've satisfied the economic or financial needs, and that frees them up, and maybe they keep working in their career, but now they have this, freedom of what they are able to focus on, and they can start seeing, what more there is to life, and on that, what did you call it? Not the second mountain. That's David Brooks' term. What was your term?
Well, like the new frontier.
New frontier. There you go.
Yeah.
Now they see this new frontier. What do you find as people are freed up and they go through this journey with you? What's the we want to say the purpose or the mission, or what are the kind of what generally comes out of it? What are some examples of how people came in thinking all they wanted to do was make sure they took care of their financial needs? Where does their kind of focus start shifting to? What are the common kind of examples of what tends to happen?
So one of our members who I won't mention their name just for anonymity's sake, but you know this person well, financially in fine shape, and actually still loves doing what he does in dentistry, but has a younger daughter who graduated a couple years from college and really thought, she says, I want to follow in my dad's footsteps, but I'd like to look around a little bit and see if there's a different way I might want to do it. So that's personal autonomy, right? So she takes a year off from school. I think very, very smart thing to do, by the way. Take a year off, slow it down a little bit. She took a year off and actually came to our meetings at Freedom Founders as an apprentice. So we love to have young people come and volunteer and let them be inside the room and just to expose them to the different way of thinking. It's not a cult, but it's just a different way of thinking. It's a good way of thinking. And so she does this for a year. She really gets kind of deep into really loving the art of the deal, finance structures. So now she is actually in her dental school, finishing her first year. But think about the different perspective that she has now about life, and now her focus and whatever she decides to do with her career and her license, it will be on her own accord, not following the footsteps and the path that's already been laid out by the industry standard. So for him, that's probably the biggest win for him. Now he loves investing his money. He loves the community. He loves growth, personal growth, and he's all part of that. But that's the legacy part for him. So that was one example. Another example, husband and wife. She actually is the dentist. He is a business owner, has a very much of a business owner mindset. And when we met with them for what we call our blueprint days, the business owner said, I don't really get dentists. They have a mindset that there's an end game. In other words, you get in your business, your practice, and you run it till 60 or 65 or whatever, and then boom, it's over, it's done. He thought, why would you ever want to stop doing something that was fun, aspirational, still made some money, profitable? It's like, why do dentists think that way? And I said, you're absolutely right, because that's what we've been taught. And we've been taught to be a grinder, not look for other ways of doing things. And he goes, that's so opposite the way I think. And so bottom line is, she came in thinking she wanted to sell her practice as soon as possible because it was a grind the way she was looking at it and feeling the pressure. Well, a year later, and particularly after this last year of COVID, which had positives and negatives for sure, but the positive was she looked at life differently, and now she's the pressure's off. She feels like they are being very good stewards of the capital that they have been disciplined to save, so that's being well set. The pressure's off in her practice. She actually is hired an associate to come in. See, that'd be a scary thing for most doctors to do because you think, well, if I bring someone else in, I'd like to have someone help me in my practice to take some load off. But gee, I've never collaborated before. I've never brought somebody in. I don't know. I'm kind of a control freak. See, that's what happens in a limited mindset when you're afraid to try things. Taking the pressure off opens up the vistas for our people. And now it's not so scary to try something. Even if it doesn't work the first time, it's okay. That's what I tell you. It's okay. In fact, if you're not testing something in your life, in your business on a regular basis, you're not growing. You're not growing. In fact, the world's in the backdrop because things are changing so rapidly today. You've got to be testing things all the time. If you're afraid to do it, stalemate. You're kind of done and cooked. And that's not the people that are in our group. They come and they just start picking up the momentum and seeing this changed vision, which is, it's just the whole energy of our community just builds off of this. It's not me. I mean, I speak to my story, but they all have their stories, and the collaboration, the energy, it's geometric in how it grows, and people get their own positive force from it. Seeing other people doing it, it's like, yeah, you mean I could do that too? I'm kind of like them, and they're doing it. It's like, why can't I do it? Exactly, you can.
I love that. One of the takeaways I have from those couple stories there is are of living and leaving a legacy and of happiness is really about perception. And you used the word earlier of intentionality. When you approach each opportunity with intentionality and a perception that, I want to do this, or I'm choosing to do this, or this is helping me towards, some goal. It's amazing how that can change things. It always brings me back when I think of things like that, I hear stories like that, to the old story of, you see one guy, standing there laying bricks, and you ask him, what is he doing? And he says, I'm building a wall, right? And you ask another guy who's doing the same job, what are you doing? And I'm building a church, right? And you ask another guy doing the same job, and he says, I'm building this cathedral for people to come and serve and worship the Lord, right? It's perception of what we're doing that can drastically change our level of happiness and the intentionality and focus we do it as well. So that's phenomenal. So I'd love to. This is kind of a big question here, but I'd love to ask you. After all these years of helping so many, incredible, successful people go through this journey, how would you define legacy? What's legacy to you?
Well, I think legacy is not what you leave to someone. It's what you leave in them. It's kind of what I talked about earlier. I mean, yes, you can pass on wealth and assets, no question, but it's what do you leave in them? What have you embedded in them in terms of values and resourcefulness? I think that's important. The other thing I would say about legacy is that oftentimes people think about legacy that's something that you do or transfer at the end of life. Say, no. We're each living our legacy each and every day right now. You're either doing it, as you said earlier, Don, by intention, or you're doing it by default. So we have a choice. Do you want to be intentional about it? Then you can think about it and think about every day, whomever you interact with. And I'm talking about interacting with people that are just doing their jobs out there. Like, I went to get a haircut today. Well, I interact with that person. That person is not just someone who just trims my hair, but they're a person with a family. And to the extent that they want to have communication, I'll communicate. I actually am interested in who they are and how their life's going and what they're thinking. I saw this through my dad, Don. My dad was a very prominent surgeon in our community growing up, and I was the benefactor of having him as a role model. He was a very humble man, and when I had the opportunity to go with him on the weekends, when he would go do rounds at the hospital to see the patients for whom he had done surgery the prior week, he let me tag along. I was, 9, 10, 11 years old. He let me tag along on some of those days. And, I was kind of in awe because you're going to a hospital and stuff's going on. And of course the doctors are given respect just out of their title. But here's my dad. I watched, and again, I didn't think about this at the time. I just thought that's who he was, which it was who he was. But thinking back, he would look at eyeball to eyeball, not just walking by with his head down, anybody and everybody who was doing something in that hospital. I'm talking about the custodian. I'm talking about the ladies who served in the cafeteria line, whether it was breakfast and coffees and donuts, whatever, or the LVNs. He would speak to every one of them, and he knew their name. And he genuinely cared. It wasn't a show thing. He genuinely cared, and that's always impacted me in my life. And so I'm thinking, so that's legacy. Right there, that's legacy. We're going through a checkout line at, a store, right? And there's the cashier, and my dad would always take time to have a conversation or have some kind of fun with somebody, and I just see the smiles in their faces. Here's somebody who, they don't know who he is, but he's just having a real. And I thought, see, that's legacy. Legacy doesn't have to be something where you have your name, on some building. It's just, what are you doing every day to up the ante for other people's lives who maybe, that day they're having a bad day. You don't know what's going on in their life, and you just showing that you care about that person as a real person. See, to me, that's what I want to look back on in my life. And I'm not bad. I want to be as good as my dad. I still hold him up in high esteem because I want to be there, right? He showed me so much. Anyway, you kind of touched on a real emotional part, which again, Don, I'll be very honest. Early in my life, David Phelps, the driver. Now, I wasn't mean to people, but I didn't take time for people. I will be honest. I did not take time. Much different today because of learnings and going through life and lessons I've learned. And I'm glad that I can live my life out with more intention today.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that vulnerability and that story. I'm in some really great organizations with some mutual friends like Chris Ryan and so forth, and in groups with incredibly successful people. And one of my first lessons when I joined one of these organizations 6-7 years ago, when I was in a group of there's about 20 of us in the meeting. We meet every month, and many of these people I meet with are billionaires, right? And very, very, very wealthy, very successful. And what I learned early on in going to these meetings, I was the only person there, at least I felt, that was not fully present, right? I was like, wow, these guys are in this meeting for a whole day, 8 hours, 10 hours, and they're fully present, right? They're fully there. They're not driving in a rush, trying to fit in on every break, another phone call, another thing they got to do. They were fully present. And then I'd start building relationships with these men and women and go to lunch with them or hang out. And I realized the same thing. I felt like I was the only person there. Nobody else mattered, fully present. And that's been something I've had to work hard on the last 6, 7, 8 years, is that level of presence and whatever I'm doing, giving that attention, actually listening to who I'm interacting with. And it's such an amazing way, though, to get so much more out of life. And also, as you said, that's legacy. It's such a great way to live your legacy. And so I really appreciate you sharing. That's great.
Well, Don, not out of respect for you, you were only 13 years old when you got into those groups. So I mean, come on, a little bit of ADHD is okay at that age. So
appreciate that. So I know you're big on real estate investing, as you know. Of course, I am as well. And so when you look at the reasons that we started off with that shirt sleeve to shirt sleeves, and you talked about the biggest reason, right, which is a lack of that second generation having the skills, the values, the discipline to know how to go about not only to manage the wealth, but to actually create more wealth, right? To sustain that wealth is what all of our goals should be, right? Not just producing enough money for our children to do nothing, but producing enough that they can do anything, is the saying I always like. But one of the smaller reasons I'd say that wealth gets lost by the third generation is due to poor investments, right? And they made bad investment decisions where they lost a large portion of wealth on some bad bets per se. So I know that's one of the reasons, or at least I'm assuming that's one of the reasons why you focus so heavily on real estate. So I'd love just your perspective on why is real estate the focus for you, for your investors, and do you think in a portfolio you can have too much of your portfolio in real estate?
So for me, it started out for me, just being inquisitive, a seeker of knowledge. And when I was in college, when I was studying the sciences, but I also found a book by William Nickerson on how I took $1,000 and turned it into $1 million in real estate. One of the classics back in the 60s, right? So I was reading books on how to be a good investor, which I didn't have any money then, but I was still thinking. And so real estate just made a lot of sense to me. And speaking about my dad again, he was my joint venture partner in the first real estate investment that we did together. He was the financier. I was the boots on the ground manager. We bought that property when I was in my first year of dental school. And so I learned so much through just that. That was my first real experience in taking theory, what I read in the book, and applying it. And what I found was during the 4 years while I was in school, while we held the property, I managed it. We didn't do everything right by any means, but we did enough things right that we ended up splitting about $50,000 in capital gain profit at the end of 4 years. Now, my $25,000 was at least as much as I made waiting tables, nights and weekends. And the return on my time was at least 10x owning the asset versus trading time for dollars. So I just saw that, I didn't run the numbers. I just realized, wait a minute, I didn't even put any money into this deal. My dad put the whole thing in. So I'm like 100% leveraged. And yet I participated in an asset that not only paid its way, paid off the debt, paid the debt as we held it. I didn't pay it off, but paid the debt. My part was time, putting in managing it. And at the end, I got halvesies in the deal, a structured deal. So I didn't rest easy knowing that. So I graduated from school. We sell that property because I was moving on. And I take my $25,000, which back in 1983, that was still a chunk of money. And I realized through studying that if I deployed that money wisely, and I knew I needed to use some leverage. So sometimes leverage is looked at as a bad word, but that's only for people who don't know how to use it wisely. I leveraged into multiple properties and built up a young age, relatively significant portfolio of single family bread and butter houses. And I didn't know what I was doing back there, Don, except I knew enough about financing. What I mean I didn't know what I was doing is I didn't pay attention to the politics or the economics of the day. It didn't matter. I focused on the fundamentals of what this asset did. I learned how to buy right and finance right and learn how to manage. That's all I need to know, because sticks and bricks buildings, are relatively easy to underwrite. It's not really tricky stuff like commercial, which is a whole advanced degree, right? So I learned how to do this, and just on the side while I was a dentist, I was just building up this portfolio. And I started snowballing down the debt with extra money from the practice, because that was going to be my plan, my quote retirement plan. That's as complicated as it was. And that turned out to be my plan B. I mean, I had at least 4 times the equity net worth in these assets than I had in my practice when I sold the practice. Now, the practice was the income generator, no question about it. I couldn't have done what I did without having that. But the net worth equity well outpaced in the assets, the outside assets, than my practice. And so when I wanted to pull the plug on the practice, I had it. There it was. I wasn't magnanimously wealthy. It was enough. I hit my freedom number, and now I could move on to the next. So my point is, with real estate, is investing in what I call today kind of essential real estate. And I'll say single family definitely is that, and certain other commercial assets in real estate I think are also, I consider, essential. Those assets move through the ups and downs, the market cycles, the corrections. They may lose some value during those market cycles, but the dividend, the cash flow, never drops off in those essential. If you invest right, that's what we love about it. So that's why I'm a big fan of real estate. I know there's other ways to get to Dublin, the end goal. There's other ways that I'm sure work, but I know that real estate works because, hey, Don, I'm a product of the product. I am your passive investor. I started active. Well, I say semi-active. It wasn't a business. It was investment. But I'm the product of the product. It works. It works. Just disciplined, right assets, investing on a regular basis. In this case, through top shelf people like DLP who actually manage the assets, which is a key part of it. I was the manager back when I was younger, but I don't want to manage anymore. I don't need to manage. I collaborate with other people who do it, who make the market. I find out who those people are, and understand their values are similar to mine, and they've got the culture and the business. It's like, okay, if there's alignment there, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to hit just a couple last questions here for you today. And so, today we've been talking mostly about legacy, and, upcoming episode or upcoming season of Impact here is going to be on DLP's 4th crisis we're focused on, which is happiness. And happiness, certainly all of the other crises that we focus on, such as legacy, the workforce housing that's affordable for local workers, people having affordable housing, jobs, people being able to have, good jobs that can provide, allow them to afford housing and healthcare and save some money and so forth. All these things are contributors certainly to happiness. But my experience has been that those things are actually a smaller contributor to happiness than people would think, meaning, a good job and affordable housing and that the biggest driver of happiness is often the feeling of connection to a purpose. I'm a big believer that it's first a connection to the Lord, but then from there having strong connections with community. I know that's one of the things you provide through Freedom Founders, and that more and more people today, COVID certainly made this even worse, are out searching for connection and community in places like social media and so forth, that they're not finding it. And there's all these studies coming out saying that we have the greatest level of unhappiness in America today as ever. And they say today depression rates are at all-time highs. Stats are all over, but 30 to 40% of Americans suffer with some level of depression. And I know I've seen a number of studies that say dentists have the highest depression levels and highest suicide levels of any profession and so forth. And that always amazed me, because compared to most, right, they make a great income. They can take care of their basic needs, but historically there's been, compared to other industries, an even higher level of unhappiness in the industry. And considering you have such expertise in the space, I'd love your overall perspective on happiness and any level you'd like to share or you think you'd be meaningful, what you've learned, or why so many people in the dental industry struggle with unhappiness.
All right. Well, I'll take that. Why dentists struggle. I'll take that second. Let's talk about this. I think a big problem we have today in society is that in many ways we are too connected, but connected in the wrong way. And that would be social media, our darn phones, right? That's, in fact, as I have the opportunity to mentor sometimes into younger groups, high school and college, which I love to do, but I find that with that generation growing up with this connectivity, and it's all texting and emoticons, and the real art of connection and conversation, unfortunately, is being lost in our society, in our culture. I'm not sure where that's going to go, but it's kind of sad to me to see sometimes these young people who should be sparked and alive, they're kind of dead on the screen. So I think that's a big problem, and I am not an expert in how to deal with that. I just see that as a symptom, a product of technology in this case. I think too that social media and this connectivity places a false pretense on what success and happiness should be, because we know very well that a lot of people use social media to shout from the mountaintop, look at me, my life is so wonderful, I got this, that, and the other. And of course, no one ever sees behind the scenes. Nobody has everything going on right. There's always something that's not perfect, but no one wants to share that, right? So finding a tribe of people, a community that are like-minded and are willing to share and willing to be vulnerable and say, hey, we all have some issues in life that we're trying to figure out. We have struggles with various things. It's okay. I mean, we're humans. I mean, we're sinners. It's okay. Let's admit it, and then find that there are ways to get through it. As long as we sense that the world out there is saying we're not good enough, how can there be any happiness or joy? So I think you've got to have that perspective and find your tribe, find people where you can feel like you can be you. It's okay just to be you, whoever you are. Don't ascribe to be this, that, or the other because it looks like they got it all together, because most don't. There's stuff that you just haven't seen yet. As far as dentists, yeah, I can speak to that very clearly. One of the biggest issues is dentists are very much empaths. Across the board, we care about people and how they feel. I mean, the sensation and the downside to dentistry, as opposed to like most other medical procedures that are done, like in the hospital, those patients are sedated, so they're out. For dentists, most of the time we're just dealing with local anesthetic, and you think about working in the mouth, that's a sensitive area for everybody. So it's like when you're working with a patient, you want to do great work for them, you want to solve problems for them, and you want to do it comfortably. That's a high bar to hit. I mean, the proficiency is not. I mean, it's a skill that you can train for. But it's working in a small space with a human being who's got sensation on the other end. And sometimes, the local anesthetics aren't perfect. And you feel so you go through a day after day after day and year after year after year of that kind of pressure. It does wear. And that's why I say that the longevity of someone in that kind of a pressure environment, if you don't have to feel the pressure to grind it out and have to work under conditions where your margins are being decreased because of outside forces like insurance, you're having to take every patient that walks in the door rather than being selective. When you get to that point, then you can breathe a little bit and go, I can deal with this. But most doctors, because of the healthcare system today, it's based on volume. Unfortunately, yeah. It's based on volume, and that no one really enjoys serving under that base, whether it's a dentist or any other kind of a medical practitioner. They dislike it. Let me put it that way. I'm not going to say they hate it, but they dislike that, and it's a hard place to be. So I'll leave it there. I think, fortunately, there's good ways for people that are under that kind of pressure, including my dental colleagues, who for the most part are finding their tribes and finding that it's okay to be them, but not all. If they can find those tribes, it takes that pressure off. It's okay to realize that you don't have to be perfect.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask one last question on quite a lighter note, and then I'm going to ask how people can connect with you and your tribe here to wrap up. So behind you, we can see this incredible library of books. I know you're the author of a number of great books. So tell us, what's been the most impactful? What are the favorite book or two that are your go-tos that you recommend?
Oh my gosh, Don, that'd be a hard one to pick. I was looking over here. I keep some on the side here also. Well, I mean, here's one that I've had fun reading. Well, I've got a tab. I've got a tab, Building an Elite Organization. I think phenomenal book. It just happens to be here on the top of my stack. But of all the books, I go back to maybe some that were most influential. I mentioned the book by boy, here I go. The author.
I know the book you're talking to. I couldn't think of it, but the turning $100 into
to turn $1 million into with Nickerson. I'm sorry. So I could look back and say, well, that was one book that was a turning point for me. So I could probably put that high on the mantle. Now, is there a book I go back to every day now? No, but the fundamentals are still there about real estate. So I could pick that up and say, yeah, fundamental. That was a strong book. But today, Don, there are so many great authors and great books. I have to be careful because my stacks, not only the bookshelf, they're in the corners. Are these going to be like holding up the house? I go, yeah, honey, I think we need extra support. So I just stack the books up. So, I got them laying around me, all over. So it's hard to pick any one particular one out. You'd have to give me a little time to source my top 10 list, and have to be for a certain purpose, because there's so many. Like you, I'm an avid reader. I love to read books. There's so much knowledge and wisdom in books by our own choosing.
So I think what I really heard you say there is that the best book you've ever read is Building an Elite Organization. That's the only one you can name by title there.
I think that's what I said. Yeah, I didn't quite spit it out quite that articulately, but yes, Don, thank you. Well, it's right there at the top of the stack. That has to say something.
There you go. Well, appreciate that. So David, this has been a pleasure. I'd love to wrap up with any last words you have, and how can people get in touch with you? How can they connect with you? How can they learn about your tribe and get access to your podcast and all the great teachings and education you put out there?
Yeah, the podcast is the Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast. We're probably getting ready to switch that, because you don't have to be a dentist to enjoy the podcast. I don't talk about dental stuff, but I speak to my tribe. But you can find it there, Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast. Our organization is not just for dentists, but we have a lot of dentists in it. It's Freedom Founders. You can find us at freedomfounders.com. I do some stuff, blogs out on YouTube. You can find me at Dr. Phelps on YouTube. So those places to connect. And yeah, I love to connect with people and, share experiences and perspectives. I mean, that's part of the fun today is for people like us, and the people we surround ourselves with is just being with other people that have different perspectives and experiences in life. That's what I love to share today. It's just the world's our oyster. We just have to go get it.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with us. Many nuggets from this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Don.
This has been Don Wenner on the Impact Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. You can check out our other episodes by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube, or check us out online by going to impactwithdon.com. I encourage and challenge you to make an impact.